The problem when governments articulate a headline policy like closing the gap is that whilst the goal may be laudable for the nation to adopt, governments then start thinking that the Leviathan needs to mobilise to achieve the stated intent. This is what thinking liberals should rightly worry about. It is not just a matter of unintended consequences of governmental action, it is the basic misunderstanding about who the main actor in development must be. The main actor in development is the individual, animated by his self-interest to pursue better prospects for himself and his family, having the capabilities to make choices in pursuit of those interests and having the opportunities to do so. The main actor in the development story is not the government. There is a role for governments in supporting individuals to develop their capabilities and to ensure people have access to opportunities, but this role is extremely prone. The failure to understand who is the principal actor is the starting place for governments not only failing to support development, but thwarting and undermining the very development they claim to be seeking. Australians harbour this general and vague belief that governments possess an inchoate potential for social justice that can be mobilised to achieve development for the disadvantaged, if only the requisite political leadership and commitment can be galvanised. Social justice is thought of as some kind of forklift that can lift entire populations up the stairs of social and economic progress without each individual within those populations having to climb with their own legs. This social justice forklift is suspected as lying in some government warehouse somewhere, waiting only for a suitable driver to come along and crank up the engines. The truth is that there is no social progress without individual progress. Social progress is the sum of a multitude of individual progress. When you have a whole lot of individual progress, you then have social progress, and only then might you have something that we might rightly call social justice. The challenge for Indigenous Australians to succeed in the future, I believe we must separate the domain of communalism in our heritage, cultures, languages and identities from the domain of liberalism in our lives. All other societies have been confronted by economic change, not the least by market capitalism. Western and Eastern societies that have made these transitions have had to work out how to separate the communalism of their traditional cultures and social institutions from the demands of the economy. The demands of the market economy conform with the articles of liberalism and are indeed antithetical to communalism. There are countless examples of societies and peoples who continue to maintain communalist arrangements in one sphere of their lives whilst maintaining a liberal sphere in their economic arrangements. The Jews and the Roman Catholics have found ways to reconcile communalist loyalties and preoccupations with liberal individualism. Indigenous Australians will have to move beyond the dominance of communalism and relegate it to that sphere of life to which it is most appropriate. Let me now turn to the relevance of conservatism and Indigenous policy. Conservatism is, in the world's dominant culture, the Anglophone sphere, usually understood to stand for a defence of established societal and cultural institutions and social values. Because the Anglophone states are so uniquely strong, English-speaking peoples harbour no existential angst that their nations and cultures will perish. Not even the English essayist Theodore Dalrymple, notwithstanding his dismay at the decline of his beloved Britain, believes that Shakespeare will be unread or the Magna Carta cease to guide the growth of global freedom. However, a conception of conservatism that is more relevant to Aboriginal Australians is patriotism in adversity, fighting for one's life for the survival of one's people, culture, and language. There is indeed no closing the gap without Adam Smith, but the people whose social and economic disadvantage is to be closed will no longer be Aboriginal Australians without Johann Gottfried Herder. 18th century German philosopher Herder objected to the decision of Emperor Joseph II to enforce one official language in his empire. In 1791, Herder published the first collection of his Letters for the Advancement of Mankind, which contained a fictional dialogue called Conversation After the Death of Emperor Joseph II. A. Which innocent preconceptions of the people did the Emperor Joseph offend? B. Of many I mention but a few. First, the preconception of language. Has a people, especially an uncultivated people, anything more dear than the language of their fathers? In it lives its entire wealth of thoughts about tradition, history, religion, and principles of life, all its heart and soul. To take from such a people their language or debase it amounts to taking from them their only immortal property, which passes from parents to children. A. And yet Joseph knew many of these peoples personally and very well. B. The more it is to be amazed at that he did not discern the intrusion. Who suppresses my language for me, thinks the simple man not without reason, will also rob me of my ability to reason and my way of life, my honour, and the laws and rights of my people. Obviously, as God tolerates all the world's languages, so should also a ruler not only tolerate the different languages of his subject peoples, but he should also honour them. A. But he wanted to achieve a more expeditious prosecution of commerce, a faster moving culture. B. A people's best culture is not fast. It does not allow itself to be forced through a foreign language. It thrives at its most beautiful, and I would like to say exclusively, on the nation's own land, in its inherited tongue. With the language, one captures the heart of the people. And it is not a grand idea to plant the seed of well-being in the most distant future among so many peoples, Hungarians, Slavs, Romanians, completely in line with, to their own way of thinking, in their most distinctive and loved fashion. A. It appeared to him to be a grander idea to amalgamate, if possible, all his states and provinces to one code of laws, to one education system, and to one monarchy. B. A favourite idea of our century, but is it feasible? Is it reasonable and beneficial? We could take Herder's text immediately and declare it to be the manifesto of Australia's original peoples. Liberalism and social democracy are necessary, but not sufficient. Man cannot live by bread alone. If the engine of self-interest is cranked up, if the incentive structures are right, if people's exercise choice, if the institution of private property is well developed, if there is social democratic provisioning of opportunity, our lives will still be unfulfilled. What we human beings really want to do are things like studying the Bible and the Talmud in the original Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, or maintain Aboriginal Australian languages in order to uphold week-long song cycles like those of the Yolngu in Arnhem Land. This may seem a strange claim when people appear to have few interests beyond socialising and entertainment. Individuals have the right to choose their lives, but my hypothesis is, however, that the cultural and spiritual side of human nature is suppressed. Aboriginal Australian traditional culture is evidence that when human behaviour is at an equilibrium, people build structures of tradition tied to language and land and pass these traditions to the next generation. Conservatism is the insight into the imperfection and mystery of human nature. This imperfection and mystery will ultimately make liberal and social democratic structures inadequate and unsatisfactory. Conservatism is the idea that distinct groups of people should continue to exist because deep difference, not just multicultural diversity, is an end in itself. We don't know what the purpose of existence is, if any. The homogenisation inherent in liberalism and social democracy is risky because it robs us of many possible attempts to answer the unsolvable existential enigmas. Conservatism is qualitatively different to liberalism and social democracy. Liberalism is based on few principles, and then we let people do the rest through choice. But there's no end to the number of human traditions. Japanese and Aboriginal Australian liberalism are the same. Japanese and Aboriginal Australian social democracy are similar. But Japanese and Aboriginal tradition are different worlds. Tradition is by definition about the detail and not the broad principle. Self-interest is the engine that drives the vehicle of social and economic progress, but tradition is the soul that drives the human will to exist. Conservatism makes the case for continued existence in a deep sense, not just in the trivial sense of having biological descendants. Too many Australian conservatives still don't understand this. They believe Aboriginal Australians will be content to survive physically and become prosperous and culturally assimilate to the great global English-speaking tradition. We will not. Let me pay tribute to your country. To the Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of New Zealand, I say that you have made great advances in your relationship and you've built a great civilization, and you stand as a beacon of inspiration to our part of the world. We can learn very much from your achievements. Thank you.